All right. In the last video that I just recorded, I was talking about my plumber friend and that challenge. And I have this too, where I see out in the world, I see companies being successful on the surface and salespeople making lots of money. And I know that they're doing it in a way that's not professional. It's not in the best interest of customers or consumers. It's not leaving people better than they found them. And it's tough as one of the good people out there to in business and sales and everything to not be making as much money or not winning at that scale, but also not wanting to play that game. And so here's the big thing. And I was thinking about this as soon as I stopped recording the other video. And I was thinking about the conversation I had with my plumber friend. And again, this applies to anything. Anybody selling anything, this is literally the same because it's all in there, is what you've got to focus on is the long game. This is the big thing I talked to him about was what is the long game? What is the long-term strategy? What is the best thing for you to do long-term? Now, here's the big challenge. And this resonated with him, and it will resonate with a lot of people if you really look at it, is one of the problems is that there is a lot of people who get into sales, who want to try sales, who want to make bank and make bank, bro, right? Like they want to make lots of money. They want to, what's that line from old school? They want to, or Step Brothers, they want to break necks and cash checks, right? And so they just want to get into it to make, right? Some people want to do it because they're good at sales. A bunch of people get into it because they just want to make money. They see a friend that makes money. They see people online that makes money. They heard about somebody in the industry who makes lots of money and they want to do it. And again, nothing wrong with money. It's about how you go about it. That is the issue. That's the issue I have with it. So anyway, so what happens is somebody gets into sales because they want to make money or they need a job and they see that there's a lot of opportunity and they're sold the opportunity in the interview. I've seen it, right? They're promised all this money they could make if they just followed the playbook or went after it or made this many calls or sold this many things, like they could make this amount of money. And so what happens is they get into the business, they start selling. They're looking at it transactional. They don't care relational because they're all about how many sales do I have to make? I got to get started. I got to get going. I need to make sales today. I need to make sales this month. And here's the balance is I don't know if I'm going to stay in business very long. I don't know how long I'm going to be in this business. I want to do this now, and then I'll probably move on and make more money somewhere else, or I'm going to do something else. And so it's this really dangerous line that they're on, which is I need to make money. I want to make money. I'm focused on money. The more I sell, the more money I can make. And I don't think I'll be in this long term, and I don't see this long term for me, or I don't know if I'll be here. Maybe I'll sell something else long term. And so it's very transactional, right? What they care about is transactional. How do I sell the most people, the most things I can in this moment? Because I may move on, or I will move on. Or what if I'm not in sales in 6 or 12 months? I don't really care about the long term. And so what happens is you have this very short-term transactional thing. And if you follow the podcast in season 7 of the Authentic Persuasion Show, many of the conversations I had with the professors were talking about the students when they come into their class in the beginning of the semester, right? This is a pro sales class and they're coming in and, the professor's asking them like, what do you think about sales? What are the bad words about sales? What are the good words about sales? And the thing that came up that I didn't really think about prior to the season, and then it was literally a theme of so many episodes, was that when you're young, and I'm just going to, blanket that the students in these classes are young, 18 to 22, 18 to 25, in college, standard college age, not returning to college, not that kind of thing. Their only experience with the world of sales is transactional stuff that they've seen, cell phones, sunglasses, clothes, things like that. Or, and cell phone being a big transactional thing that maybe they're involved with, and or watching things that their parents or their friends buy, right? Being at the car dealership when their parents are buying a car, or being on the outside and watching their parents buy a house and go through that process, or buy appliances for the house, or whatever that might be, that they're seeing these things that are transactional. And if you're not in the transaction, it feels very transactional and you're watching it. And so then what happens is this group enters into a sales world working for a company that doesn't train them properly, doesn't give them all the tools, and doesn't help them focus on the long game, just wants them to close deals now because the company needs deals now. And then you're taking this transactional person, putting them in this transactional role that should be long-term, but nobody's focusing on long-term, and it becomes this transactional loop. right? My plumber friend, and this is where this started from the conversation that he and I had, is that he was talking about this younger salesperson that's in the same field as him in plumbing and is always like selling and selling and selling and talking about this and just selling as much as he can to people and always bragging about how much he sold somebody on, like, let's say a plumbing project. But it, like, as soon as I mentioned the transactional side, my friend was like, that's exactly it, right? Versus what my friend wouldn't do, right? Because I mentioned this before, is that he is more old school, relational, long-term professional. And so for him, he would never do that, right? He would never oversell somebody or try to get the most he could right now in this transaction versus the long game, right? And maybe it's a demographic thing, maybe it's an age thing, maybe it's a, it's a something thing where it's more long-term than short-term. And again, I don't think it's just age, it's not just demographic. I think it's also experience in the world and when somebody enters sales versus when they might be in their 40s or 50s and looking at it and realizing relationships are more important than the transactional side. So if you're watching this, here's the lesson of me rambling on about this. Here's the big thing. If you're in sales, actually, let me take that back. Because if you're in sales, you probably, I don't know if you're going to think about it. If you're a leader of salespeople and you're watching this, here's the big lesson. So you've got to help your salespeople act like a hunter and think like a farmer. So what you want them to do is you want them to act on the hunt. They got to be selling in the moment, right? They can't just be building relationships forever, but they've got to think like a farmer where they're worried about planting seeds and relationships in long term. How do I sell this person the best thing now? And then focus on the long game. What is the lifetime value of this person and this potential client, right? Like my plumber friend, he didn't overcharge me. He could have charged me more. He could have talked me in all kinds of stuff, but he's playing the long game. I know now that I can trust him. I mentioned this in the previous video. When you find somebody you trust, you will go back to that person. And so then I will call him and say, hey, I now have a bigger project. I want your help, right? I'm going to go to him because I know he's going to tell me the right thing to do. And I even wrote about this in my book. And it was a chapter called The Power of No, of saying no, where it talks about that, right? Saying no as a professional and what that could lead to long term. And so this is the big thing. If you're a sales leader, make sure you're building a culture of salespeople who are not solely transactional. They're not just focused on the transactions in the moment, today, this week, this month, this quarter. If your people are constantly focusing on how do they finish the month strong, how do they finish the quarter strong, how do they finish the year strong, you're doing it wrong. If that's a constant, right? Not just sometimes and you want to finish strong every once in a while, that's different. But if your constant routine is having your people push for those big end of month, quarter, or year, you're doing it wrong because you're really focused on transactional, not relational. And I mean it. And I've talked about it a lot of times on the podcast. If you want to have a successful sales process, which means not just the salespeople, but also the pipeline and the clients that come back with or without your salespeople. Like the salespeople, maybe they've moved on, but that customer still likes your company, doesn't feel like they were wronged in any way. Then you want to focus on a longer term relational sales mode, right? I'm not saying take a long time to close deals. You can close sales now. You can have a short sales cycle that doesn't feel transactional. And that's the big key. How can you have your sales process not feel transactional so that you have a long-term successful sales program?